There was a game I played a while ago called Rayman Legends. It was a simple, standard 2D platformer that had a lot of really great art design, and it had a neat little 4-player co-op mode. However, in this game, there was a bonus mode thrown in called Kung Foot. Kung Foot was one of the craziest, jankiest, saltiest 2D soccer-like games I've ever played. It was basically soccer on crack. The crazy physics, the hit detection, the sound of the audience roaring when a goal was scored. Holy crap, this mode was an absolute blast to play. But it never felt fully developed, even though it was really fun, and because of that, I never really got into it to play it for hours on end. Years later, enter Kungfu Kickball by Whale Food Games. Seemingly another really fun 2D soccer game on crack. Could I have finally found a true adaptation of this guilty pleasure of a game mode? Let's find out. Welcome back to Quest for the Couch, the show where we check out local multiplayer games. Today we're looking at Kungfu Kickball, a game that supports up to 4 players locally, has an online component, crossplay, and it's currently available for about $20 on Steam. As I've already mentioned, Kungfu Kickball is a 2D soccer game on crack, and I am not using that word to really exaggerate here. It's an incredibly fast-paced 2D soccer game with brawling and aerial acrobatics. The object of the game, like any soccer game, is to score into the other player's goal. But in Kungfu Kickball, you punch and kick your way to victory, whether that be the ball or your opponent's. In general, you want to get a kick or punch in on another player to have a better chance of receiving the ball. When doing this, your opponent will only be incapacitated temporarily, so you'll have to make use of the few seconds you have. You can also do a special move where you can essentially dash really far ahead. It also teleports through other players. This little Naruto, Dragon Ball Z anime, whatever the hell you want to call it, burst of speed that you get is paramount to the game. You can do it in the air or on the ground, and it's really fun. And you're going to need it. When you do any kind of turning in this game, left or right, you want to be deliberate as it takes a second to turn around. This avoids the problem of constantly flipping around in the wrong direction when you're frantically trying to hit the ball in a panic. But the stiffness does make it slower to turn in general, so you gotta be more deliberate to catch up with other players. You can simply hit your anime dash button to get around this. The dash button warps you ahead, lets you turn on the dime, it lets you move through other players, and even the ball. It's actually faster than running by itself. This one little mechanic makes the game a hell of a lot more fun and enjoyable, and easier to learn. As you've probably seen by now, you've got a ton of leeway in what direction you hit the ball. This is because you can attack it from the air or ground and at multiple angles. And as you'd imagine, with all this momentum going into striking that ball, it's going to go really far, really fast. This makes for something really engaging, frantic, and ultimately fun. Despite all this crazy acrobatic motion and aerial combo-ness, this game is actually really easy to pick up and play. The game almost feels like Rocket League in that regard, but the best part of this game compared to Rocket League is the learning curve. It's only a 2D plane, and while you can move very fast, the controls don't take that long to get used to. In about 15 minutes I was able to get the controls down and I started having a ton of fun. But another thing that helped this game was the goal positioning. As I've said before, the game uses a bell as a goal. This is important because it allows a much more intuitive and fun way of scoring. The bell hangs off at an angle on every arena, and there's usually some kind of slope behind it. Why does this matter? Well, you're not going to ever shoot the ball past the goal into a theoretical out-of-bounds zone, or in an area that'll make it hard to scoop the ball back out of and try again. Instead, the slope behind the bell acts as another way to score it. Get enough momentum to have it go up that little sloped ramp to hit the bell, or bounce it off the ramp and have it hit the bell. For that reason, it's easy to score goals, and the game feels forgiving and easy to learn, but at the same time, it doesn't feel watered down, and there seems to be a high skill ceiling too. I think this game has the core gameplay down really well, but now we gotta talk about the local multiplayer aspects. Alright guys, we've talked about the game in detail, now I want to talk to you about whether or not you should buy the game and add it to your local multiplayer collection. We'll do that based on 3 criteria: price, pick up and play aspect, and lasting appeal. For price, this game is in the tier 2 area, that being under $30 but above $10. For games at this price point, I expect something a little extra beyond just the local multiplayer component, whether that be online or single-player offerings. Now, on the surface, this game does have online, and the developer has pulled out several stops to get a community going, such as managing a Discord that anyone can join through a convenient QR code on the screen, in addition to having cross-play across all platforms. Unfortunately, like many other multiplayer indie games, this one was kinda barren. I bet if you really enjoy the game and spend the time, you could really get a small group to play with, but for the average consumer like me who wants to just get on and play, you're gonna be waiting, sometimes in vain. This game does have a single-player component in the form of arcade mode. It's just a sequence of battles to unlock the other characters in the game, but I did have fun playing with it, as it was getting more challenging as I completed rounds, and there was an investment there, like it was my time for the unlocks, and then there were stakes, and it was actually really fun. It did hold my attention. Regardless, if you're expecting to only play this game in local multiplayer and maybe dedicate the time for online, you'll be okay. Alright, so for our next criteria, we have the pick up and play aspect, or how soon will you be able to dive in and really get into the game? Well, pretty fast actually. Like I said, within 15 minutes I got the controls down and started having a blast. The game worked really well with my Xbox One controllers via the wireless adapter, and you do have the option to rebind your buttons, and you can have the teleport sprint button be 2 separate buttons simultaneously for added comfort. You could also use a keyboard if you're lacking a spare controller. You do have individual controller remapping for each player individually, but I would have liked to see a profile system that you could just select and just have those controls at the ready. But you can set each controller manually to player 1, 2, 3, or 4, so you don't have to futz around with reconnecting your gamepads to get the right config. You do have some locked characters out of the box, so you can't play with everything, but that's more incentive for the previously mentioned arcade mode, so that's fine. Now, going back briefly to the online component, the game does feature a local online mode. So if you have a friend over, you can in theory pair up and play online. But there's a catch. The developer was nice enough to add a practice mode where you fight the AI, but for whatever reason, when entering practice mode while you're paired with another person, only player 1 will be in the practice mode, not player 2. So whoever player 2 is will just be watching player 1 fight the AI while they both wait. I hope the developer could patch this so that we could have both players in the practice lobby and they can practice things like teamwork moves and strategy while they wait. It's nice that the game has a practice mode while you wait, and I wish more games had it, but I wish it had a little bit more development time. Alright, so let's move on to our final criteria. Lasting appeal. Are you going to come back to the game? Are you going to keep playing? Well, for many people, having rock-solid gameplay is all you need, but how long will that last? And more importantly, how long will that last for the people that you're playing with? In terms of extra content and modes, it's no Towerfall or Invisigan Heroes, and those games were $5 cheaper. However, I'd say Kungfu Kickball has variety where it counts, and it will keep you engaged. For starters, the AI is really fun to play against if you play at the intermediate or advanced difficulties. The beginner level was a little too easy for me. I mean, yeah, even the higher difficulty modes, they do derp out a few times here and there, but I really enjoyed pairing up with a friend and doing a 2v2 against them. The game boasts some characters you can pick from that have some skill differences, such as faster speed or more power when punching. The differences are big enough to mix up the gameplay a bit, but subtle enough to make sure no character in particular is broken, at least in my experience. The game does feature a selection of maps that have distinction beyond visuals and music. Each map has different terrain and can completely change up a match and how it's played. And speaking of the music, it's pretty great. The sound design is a bit underplayed. There's not a whole ton of sound effects beyond the announcer and a couple sound effects here and there. And that's probably intentional, as I'd imagine. The developer didn't want there to be a dozen sounds going off at the same time in a Kung Fu sports game where you'll be doing a lot of the same moves over and over again. I bet it would drive some people insane to hear those same sounds all the time in rapid succession. But the music is really nice. There's maybe like one track I didn't like at a certain sequence in like one map, but otherwise it can light a fire under your butt, and it really gets you going. It's a nice soundtrack. The game does have some options to alter the rules slightly too. Like, instead of timed, it can go by points. You can adjust how many points or how long a game is. You can adjust what the ball looks like. It's pretty standard. Unfortunately, there's no crazy options like adjust the gravity or have the goals switch positions mid-game or have any kind of frantic, fun, option mode. Finally, there's no real progress tracking for online. And there are no offline profiles either, as previously mentioned, for like holding your controller profiles or tracking player stats. Even locally, I would have liked to have seen a better progress tracker or at least some goofy modes to give the game a bit more life. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, conclusion time. Do I recommend Kungfu Kickball? Hell yeah, I do. I might have some mixed things to say about this game, but I honestly think the gameplay is so superb that it makes all my criticism seem small by comparison. At $20, I can see people pouring hours and hours into this title, and I'm definitely busting it out again soon as I get another game night going locally with my friends. Is it the Kung Foot successor that I wanted? Not quite. It's not nearly as ridiculous as that game. That was on an entirely different level, but at the same time, Kung Foot was a game that was just a one-night thing. You'd break out every now and then for funsies. The way that game played would probably make it difficult to build on top of effectively, whether it be through modes or competitive play. It would just be kind of relegated to a gimmick game, no matter how much just stuff you put into it to make it better. Kungfu Kickball works a lot better as a proper game, and I really think you should check it out for that reason. It's one of the most engaging local multiplayer games I've played in a while. It may not have tons of modes like I'd want it to, but man is it fun. It really is like crack. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. I'm out.